Welcome to Write More Light. My name is Sarah, and I will be today talking about why we should read. I know that sounds really boring because, if you're watching this, written word. But the number one piece of advice I always see from, big name authors is read everything you can get your hands on. And so I've been trying to interrogate why, not in a not in a silly way, like it's obvious advice, right? If you want to write well, you should read. But it also seems a little simple, right? And because this is something, I decided to look into it. Following my little talk on why we should read, I will talk a little bit about upcoming things at the Midwest Writing Center, as always, and then I will leave you with a writing prompt. So let's get into it. Um, I'm obviously inspired first by, you know, interrogating, like I said, the reason that all of the big name writers read everything you can if you want to be a better writer. First, I've talked previously about how to read as a writer, how to look for the read station about we started reading. This is about why it doesn't matter what you read. And that's the first thing I'm going to go over. No shame reading. Now, I've worked at a bookstore and I've talked with other booksellers a lot about this, and librarians and teachers. And we'll see parents who don't want their kids, parents of young children who don't want their kids. And we in the bookseller, librarian, teaching community hate that. We hate it. It's as if there's of what is reading, and that's garbage. First and foremost, you want people to like reading, so you need to make reading accessible to them. If the comic book aspect, go with it. There's nothing, especially for children. Under no circumstance do we shame them for reading because we want reading to be exciting. And I also don't want comics to feel like a stepping stone to real books because they are real books. So I think what people think in this situation is either like their own experience reading or that there's a true hierarchy, like reading without pictures is better for you somehow. And that's not the case. Something happens when you read versus listen to a story being told or watch a movie. And that happens whether or not there are pictures there. Um, if you want to get real weird about it, when you're reading a book with no pictures, you're, staring at a piece of dead tree. And I know some people aren't visual, but like that's what reading is. We're creating things in our brain as we look at an inanimate object. So the idea that images attached in advance is bad is crazy. I understand it. I understand a picture book to thinking about graphic novels or comics, but there's no science behind that being lazy or um, lowbrow. There's just not. It's still literature. So that's my first part of it. The second part is I had a joking, totally fun conversation with a friend recently because I my Instagram account that I've read a couple of really bad books this year, and one of them I just finished on the newest Twilight book. It was hot garbage, and I don't say that as someone who was like, I'm gonna read this book and hate it. I read the Twilight books when I was 18 or 20, and they were really fun. And that's okay. You can read because things are fun, and they don't have to be highbrow. They don't have to be good. Um, like good. They should be good. You should enjoy them, and whatever good means to you is valid. So that's another thing. One of my favorite things to do, and I'll get into this a little later, but I love to read YA, especially if I'm having trouble reading. It tends to be easier for me to get into. So if if I've been reading something highbrow or difficult, and then it's hard for me to restart my reading, middle grade, which is for like elementary, middle school students, or YA books, get me back in that habit. So if someone were to shame me for that, I would not take that kindly. I would wonder who hurt them. And I say that in jest. Someone probably shamed you if you think that there's a higher or lowbrow thing to read. At the end of the day, something excellent is happening in your brain when you read. Presumably, you're having a good time. Like, you don't have to put yourself through hell because someone said this was a good book. That said, there are tons of resources out there to help you read better or understand better. There's a lot of books that I have struggled with that were, or books like Anna Karenina. I hated it. I hated it, and in college on my own. And then later I took a class with a professor who loved Russian Lit. I don't know what the class was anymore, but he brought it up, and I was the only person in class who had read it. And after he talked about it, I was like, oh, I get it now. So, there are always ways to help it. And it's also okay to hate highbrow. I think it took me a month. I remember just commented brow AF at the time, and that is true. And now it's like fancy. And I think probably just because it's difficult to read, right? Thank you, MC. This works exactly with what I was going into. Um, we think that like difficulty makes something higher quality, and that's also not the case. There are also a handful of topics that we just decide are highbrow, which is not legitimate either. So I beg you to read shamelessly, and I beg you to not shame anyone about what they're reading, because what is or is not highbrow or popular is irrelevant. It's some collective judgment, and we cannot read with judgment, or we won't gain anything from what we're reading. And that's probably like a longer philosophical conversation about going through life without judgment. But I definitely feel most passionately about the arts in this way. What we consume in the arts, we should consume because we love it. Or and yeah, back to Shakespeare being lowbrow at the time, it really was. This was pop culture. Um, so like it's just the collective decided something, and that's what makes it high or lowbrow. Um, let your let your heart decide. I mean that though. Read what interests you and have no shame about it. That's a really big one for me. I know, especially in college, when you're surrounded by lots of young people who are trying to prove their intellect, I felt like I couldn't admit to reading YA, which is ridiculous because I wanted to study children's lit. Like, just read what you love. And that I want to go into my goals for 2020. I am not saying that wrong. I mean, this year that's about to end, my goals for 2020 in reading. I never have made, at least in memory. But I had a couple this year because I wanted to put my money where my mouth is, and because I know a lot of writers. So, and I want to be able to talk about it. I want to put my money where my mouth is, like I said. So I made, I think, two. I might stumble over this later and decide there were six or something, but two reading goals this year. One was read genres I had never read before. Read unless it's like middle grade. And even then, I probably read it as a child. Or it's like magical realism fantasy, or at least I wouldn't call it fantasy. Read fantasy was on my list. And, there's a difference between high fantasy and like low fantasy. I clearly don't know the terms, but so read genres I'd never read before. That included romance. That included there's something called cozy mysteries. So I have read those as it turned out, but I don't read a lot of mysteries. I have, but it's not something that I engage with. To like fiction. And I also nonfiction. I love literary nonfiction. Um, but these, I sat down and I thought about genres, and I was working at a bookstore at the time, so it was easy for me to like look around the store and be like, okay, there's delineation here, there's a delineation here, there's delineation here, and then I could ask the other booksellers, I know that you're nerdy. What do you read, and what would you recommend for a beginner? Which was awesome. The other thing, there's a pandemic. Don't endanger the internet. Reach out to people. Is you can everything, and I saw myself that way, but it wasn't accurate. So that was goal one, read, and goal two was read local people I know. Up on Goodreads, I called this category, because I made a shelf for it, local small world. So people I'm 6 degrees away from or less fall into this category, which living in Iowa City was a lot of people, but it also like made me feel really good that I didn't have to like go too far outside of my comfort zone to call it that. But it was also really important for me to read Friends. Like, Meowth. um, and so there were two books I read that had overlap there. Yeah, two. That I can think top of my head. I read a lot of small world books this year, which I'm so pleased about. Um, and yeah, so I read a romance for the first time ever. Now I've read two. Um, and that was by in my circle, right? Um, Eliza David, the Cougarette series is the one that I started. She's got a lot of books out there. She lives in Iowa City. She's a librarian. In the comments here. So scared. Saucy before, and it's not something that like I will ever seek out. It's just I don't even read. I mean, I don't even watch rom-coms very often. More explicit stuff just doesn't appeal to me. But there was this magical escapism to these books, and she put the most insanely complicated plots that were just like didn't expect to like it, and be like, "Oh, Sarah, why did you buy my book if you thought you would hate it?" But it was really important to me to experience whether or not I was going to like it, and thankfully, I liked it. I needed it at the time too. There's this Roseanne Cash quote that's, I believe that books find their way to you when you need them. And I needed that escapism, and it was complicated enough that I was just incredulous the whole time at the characters and their lives. So, dope, right? The fantasy I read, urban fantasy. The fantasy I read was also by a local, Erin Casey. She and she runs the writers' rooms, which you should check out. It's a very, very good resource for Iowa, Western Illinois. And they do that big author event every year, Imagine Other Worlds with Authors, which is a whole conference, and it's wonderful. Um, and I was scared to read fantasy. Unless it's like Rick Riordan, right? So it's like YA middle grade and about mythology, which I already have some familiarity with. It's just not my cup of tea. And I'm gonna put Erin Casey in the. Um, I don't even watch like TV shows that have much fantasy going on in them. So I was scared about that too. But again, there was she has this favorite words, and I always forget what it means. And she knows her genre, and she had this these beautifully complicated characters, and it was probably the most inclusive book I've ever read without it feeling like, oh, you're sticking in a character who has X marginalized feature. It was very natural. I was really impressed. So there's a something to note here about the read local goal of mine, which is I, until recently, being someone who works with local authors now, this has changed, but I have always been wary about the term local author. I'm like, okay, so this person like printed this off in their basement and is now selling it at the farmer's market, and they are therefore not talented. First of all, that's garbage. This goes along with no shame reading. No shame writing. Important too. First of all, yeah, that's garbage. Being self published is not less good. Um, Being published at a small press is not less good. There are a million reasons to publish the way you publish, and part of it is because you write because you love it and you want control over your book, and that is valid and important. Anyway, if you too have this weird stigma in your heart about reading local, let's talk. Let's find the wonderful authors who live where you are. This is part of like shopping local, right? Like we need to support our neighborhood, our community, and there's amazing talent, whatever it is that you're looking for. Obviously, some of my favorite writers are from the Quad Cities, and I wouldn't have discovered them if I didn't know them, or I have an itch, or if I weren't involved in the local writing scene. There are so many amazing talents. Obviously, I'm a fan of Ryan Collins, the director of the Midwest Writing Center. Misty Urban writes some amazing short fiction. She was on the show a couple of weeks ago. I don't know why I said ago. I've noticed I've had a Erin Casey and Eliza David. Oh my goodness, we just lost a very talented writer whose name has escaped me, and I feel like a big jerk. So, forgive me there. Tons of very in our community, no matter what community you're in, it's true. And so, reach out to someone else in your community, to a librarian, to a writing center, to a, and they're gonna have great advice. Or, I'm sure if you're watching this on Facebook, there are Facebook groups. Um, there's nothing. It's also like a local band. Royce and I talked about this last week. You say that, and it's like, fabulously famous and talented people from your town, no matter who you are or where you live. That's just true. You don't say like local actor when there's a celebrity actor, um, because these are just wonderful artists who live where they live. True. It's easier for me to believe and swallow is that I'm involved in this community and that I've lived in like writing towns in the past, Iowa City, Seattle, Chicago. Nobody's going to be like, local author from Chicago. Like, no, it's you're just going to say the author's name because it's a big city. Even in Iowa City, people don't say like Iowa City author. They say like whatever. Um, so try to bridge yourself of judgment in your reading. Number one. That's my biggest thing. I've talked for 20 minutes about judgment. I apologize. But I don't. It's very important. And so, yeah, part of that is I've got those itches. um, why we started reading in the first place as children, outside of, being told to or, learning to read. For me, and I think for a lot of people, it was escapism. And that's valid. That is what opens up our brains, opens up our imaginations, and opens up our hearts to new experiences and new thoughts, and that's still why I read. I want to learn. First of all, I have an insatiable curiosity, and I think a lot of us do, whether or not we're willing to admit it in the hustle. I also, sometimes, like I said, when I was reading Eliza David's Cougarette, I needed an escape right then. I was very, very stressed. I think I was moving. I don't totally remember. It was this year. There was a pandemic. It's reasonable to be stressed. Um, I needed an escape, and it was there. I opened that book, and my life and my world no longer existed, and it was awesome. That's why I read fantasy as a kid. A Wrinkle in Time was my favorite series. It was the first, um, and Harry Potter did that for a lot of us as kids too, and obviously like the YA middle grade fantasy is never gonna die. It's an amazing, amazing genre. Fiction I think fits into that, and we've got a lot of that in YA. The Hunger Games, for instance. I wish that I could think of something less obvious, but here we are. Um, Escapism is valid, and entering these new and different worlds does great things for your brain, and it does great things for your writing too. It's open what you thought of. Allowed to read. Also, what started me writing. I wanted to create a world outside of my own, the same as the ones I was reading. I no longer write like that. I no longer know how. I feel actually a little bit ripped off that like my imagination fell off somewhere along the way. Uh, but it is what it is. I'm working on it. I take as many writing classes as I can, and I encourage you to. There's a pandemic in there. um, just when you're reading, when you're picking out something to read today, tomorrow, whatever, think about why you started reading and what you love about reading before you think about like what you're supposed to read. I do want to rewind a little bit and talk about shameless reading or shame-free reading. um, Having read Twilight, and again, I was 19 or 20 when I did that, opened me up, and I read it out of curiosity because everything I heard was just that it was one was obsessed. And so that started me on this track of reading something that, my little teenage rebel self would have been horrified by. I started reading bestsellers, and a lot of them are true, but a lot of them are not. And it's important for me to know what excites other people as readers and as humans. I like people. I like to pretend I'm a misanthrope, but I love people, and I want to know what's going on in the consciousness of the people around me. And if something's bad, there's no actual rule about that. You don't have to read a whole book. If it will ruin your a little while for one thing, and that's a real crime. Don't let anything happen to ruin your love of reading. It's okay to shelf a book for a while and come back to it. And it's okay to just quit. Just because, you're five English teachers and five English professors and your best friend and your father doesn't mean it's good either. Good is mostly subjective. I mean, there are things that you can say like this is quality and this is quality and this is quality, but at the end of the day, like enjoyment is gonna win out over everything else. So, now why reading? I already sort of touched on why reading makes you a better writer, and it's because it opens what different writing styles exist, what different worlds exist. Every book you read, and especially every writer, gives you an outside point of view. It gives you a perspective that is not your own, even if it's very similar to yours. But that's also why we talk about it, right? Because we have very close to a monolithic canon of works from authors who have a lot in common. They're lasted a long time. So I'm going to say, at a certain point, they were all people of means. They were mostly all white, unless you include like the Harlem Renaissance in your canon, which most Western canon doesn't. It's still relatively new. It was 100 years. And I was gonna say 80 years because I think it's the year. Um, but it's still relatively recent, uh, and therefore we're not out of perspective and diversity of thought in those books. That's why we talk about expanding the canon. But every book you read, every author you read, every writer you read is. Um, I am sure it's possible for an author to make any sense. Also, as we grow as human beings, we read differently. So presumably, even if you read the same book twice, because you're a different person now. Also, that sounds like some weird postmodern marketing stuff. I don't Andy Kaufman your books. Um, Reading will also make you a better person for the same reasons. It will make you a better writer. It's it should first be about enjoyment. That's probably a hot take, especially as someone who's like representing a writing about enjoyment. If it's not about enjoyment, why are you here? I often talk about how much I not hate. Hate is a very strong word, but I don't like writing, and like I don't love working out. And writing is hard. It is really hard work, but I absolutely love it. And I don't want to live without it. I made a comparison once that writing is not like breathing. I could absolutely live without it, but I would not enjoy that. Um, it would, it would be like not, it would be like eating the same food at all times for a world without writing for me. And when you like start to get sick to your stomach, um, there's just no magic without writing for me. And ditto for reading. I often use the terms interchangeably because that you can consume. Writing as a verb is something that you do. So writing doesn't have to be academic to make you a better person or a better reader, and writing doesn't have to be good to make you a better person or a better reader. But the number one thing is shameful reading. Sorry, both. It should not be anything love, and sometimes it's difficult. And some of my favorite books were ones that were really hard to read, like Invisible Man by not not Wells Ellison. It's one of the and one of my favorites, and um, a sign of both of those things, a sign of my love for it and a sign of the difficulty I had with it. I wonder if it's near me. No. Is there are post-it notes on half the pages because it was so hard and so enriching and so. I can't recommend that book highly enough. They're just Ellison's mastery of language, and somehow he works out this insane plot, and also he makes references to things, and it's just very, very deep metaphor, and also like still you have a surface thing going on. I could talk about Invisible Man forever. I will not. So it can be hard, but it should never be begrudging. Um, so, as the final part episode, I'll talk about how to maintain a reading habit because that is something that I have difficulty with myself. Um, but there are lots of things in life that make it hard. And we talk a lot about how to. But in my humble opinion, if you're not reading, you're going to grow less as a writer than if you read and write. How to maintain a reading habit. Read without shame. I have already said this, and this is just my number one piece of advice. Um, when I am stressed, when life is hard, when reading gets really hard, because, like I said, sometimes you read a really difficult book and then you just don't have mental energy to pick up another book. It's been on your reading list for a long time. Uh, it's just hard. It's just hard to read. But particularly when life is hard, this is a year, 2020 is a year that has been really difficult for everyone. Um, pick up an easy to read book. It sounds really simple and obvious, but I think that there's so much shame around reading easy that it's just not something that a lot of us do. I've talked to a lot of I know that there are people out there who what's on their to read list, like they've got I have books everywhere. I can't just like grab them and be like, and this is on my. Some people have a to be read list. Pick up the next one and read it. There, I have a to be read pile next to my side of the couch, and next to my side of the bed, and on the shelf to my left, your right. um, and they're all books I'm really, really. And the next one I read is probably not. So if you're someone who can just read whatever's in front of you and like get through it, dope. More power to you. Please give me advice. um, but you don't have to do that. Read what excites you in the moment. And something I do too when I can't decide what to read next, or if I'm having difficulty reading, is I'll just take that whole stack of books I'm excited about, put them in front of me, and read a couple pages from them all. Page. I think a lot of people do that when they're like at a library or a bookstore trying to figure out what to buy or check out. You can do that in your own home too. Um, Another fun thing that I do, I'm going to admit to something that, as long as they've existed up until this year, I was a big jerk about. I looked upon it derisively. I have an e reader. I know. No, no shush. It's awesome. So if I'm struggling with something that I have at home, it's a pandemic. I library from home because I can get ebooks. And you don't need an e-reader to get an ebook. You just need something with a screen. You can download them onto your phone or your computer or whatever e-reader system. I have trouble reading on screens though, so having an e-reader that has the fake paper thing going on has made a world of difference for me. I historically have been one of those people who's like paper or bust. Um, but this was I've told this story a lot. This is my final purchase before in April e-reader because I couldn't handle the idea of not being able to access new books. And I don't buy on it because I write all over my books. I want to be able to reference them later. I important experience. I was on your e-reader, but it just feel right to me. Also, the books that I don't necessarily want to write all over, the books that are not highbrow or super important or become my favorites, I can get from the library or public domain and not lose any sleep over. So that's been helpful to me too, being able to access books that at any time, first of all, but being able to access books that, especially in more or less a lockdown. I only have what books I already have. So that's the thing for me. Historically, if I have a few extra bucks and I'm struggling to buy a new book, and that's not something I do, first of all, and it's the safest way to go about life during a pandemic. You can't just go out and shop for fun. So using ebooks has been super helpful to me as of late. But I think I covered that base. Just find something that's easy to read, find something that excites you. The second part of maintaining a reading habit, I have a cell phone problem. I like to job, yes, because I have to use social media for my job, but that's garbage. Social media sucks you in whether or not you do it for money. um, so I also have an app that turns my phone off for X amount of time. You may not have an important, maybe prioritize writing over reading. Totally valid. This is a today and just kidding. I will never judge you for these things. Never. Yeah. So finding my way to be distraction free for even 15-20 minutes so that I get a little bit of reading in. Important. I think that this is really common advice about maintaining a reading habit, but do it for 20 minutes before bed. People first thing in the morning, maybe reading last thing at night is the same. It is certainly what works for me. With my to-do list or whatever, and then I sit down in bed and it's quiet. It doesn't have to be long. A lot of people have a lot of 10 minutes. You know, do it like you're doing it for the whatever, a little bit, and give yourself a break too. Like, read a news article, but read the whole news article. Don't skim it. Give yourself the credit of consuming a full piece. Subscribe to a writer's. There's a lot of different things out there. There's like Patreon and there's Substack. There's a lot of stuff out there, but find a writer you like and subscribe to them. I talk about Liz Lenz a lot, but I'm subscribed to hers, and Kristen DeMar. She's another Midwest Writing Center person. A lot of they're famous and or coffee, all the names for these things. I don't have one, so I haven't done the research on them. But go to your favorite writer's social media, and you'll probably find that they have one of these funny accounts that you pay $3 a month to access their works in progress or their blog. That counts. That counts. Just read something. And as I often have said, like, make it low pressure so that you keep it up. It doesn't have to be a book. Just read something by someone other than you and read the whole thing. If what you're reading is a news article or an essay or a blog post, read the whole thing. You don't have to read a whole book if it's. One more thing to maintain. Read what excites you. I said read every day. I said read all of something. Oops, sorry. Also, it doesn't have to be every day, but make sure you read often and set a goal for yourself to put a put a little pressure on it if you struggle with that. Maybe an accountability buddy, maybe an alarm on your phone, or one of those apps that, like, every day at whatever time, maybe you go to bed at 10:30, you set an alarm on your phone that says read and then locks your phone for 10 minutes. The last thing is in line with all the other things I've been saying, which do it for yourself. Because not because you think that you should have a New Year's resolution to read more. For you, do it because you're worth it. Do it because it makes you feel good. If it doesn't make you feel good, you're doing it wrong. Again, I'm always, always, always here, and I mean this genuinely, in a professional or personal fashion. I'm always here to give reading and reading support. I love it. It's very important to me, obviously, or I wouldn't be here talking about it for 40 minutes. My God, I'm sorry. You must be so tired of my voice by now. It's important. If it's important to you, if you manage to sit through me for 40 minutes, it's probably a little bit important. Then that's why you should do it. That is all of my little notes on reading more light into your life. So now it's time for our free write. Before we get to that, I'm going to give all my little notes because I know some folks will sign off at the free. My little notes. So up and coming at the Midwest Writing, our holiday open house, that is December 12th. But if you would like to be included, I need you to RSVP by this Friday. That's tomorrow. Woo! Get you a care package. We're gonna have of little goodies that we'll send you, and when I say little goodies, I don't mean like crap you're gonna end up throwing away. There'll be some literature. There'll be some. This is. I'm putting in the chat. Okay, so email me if you want to RSVP. It'll be fun, and we'll get you a little care package so that we can all do the same open house activities together. Yeah, RSVP now, right now. Do it right now. Also, if you have any on any social media or via email, there's always the Midwest Writing, the MWC. After that, we have just expanded, elongated, postponed. Deadline. I apologize for my grasp on the English language. We've on our chapbook series, and this goes for folks outside of our service area as well. We want to publish the best chapbook out there, so we'll even publish a couple if we get a couple of really great ones. That is the Foster Stall chapbook series we're starting. This will be the inaugural publication. Keep doing it every year, and that doesn't have to be poetry. That can be prose. That can be hybrid, fiction, nonfiction, whatever it is that you write, script, whatever. Send it to us in chapbook form. There's tons of social posts that I've made about it. Information's all on our website, mwcqc.org, mwcqc.org, in the chat now, to look up the rules and guidelines. So submit to that if you can. Following that, the deadline for our 2020 Was a Disaster anthology is January 31. Same information, go ahead and hit us up with questions, comments, concerns, and submit whatever you've written or created about 2020, your experience here this year, here on Earth. That's what we've got going on right now at the center. So now I will leave you with the free write. I would like you to write. Want to read. Is that too broad? Do you hate that? Because it's way too broad for a writing prompt. I know it, but I got so excited when I came up with it. Okay, so barring that, what I'll be doing probably is journaling about what I should be writing if I were writing what I want to read or what I. But if you need a little prompt for a creative work, fiction writer, or you're annoyed with the idea of journal, then please take the prompt of a leak. Not, well, but my inspiration as of late, and I keep working with this god awful tired metaphor at this point because there have been like 30 pages of me just writing on a leak as a metaphor for me. I think I talked about this already this week. I'm so sorry. All over my hands. And I thought that was a beautiful metaphor. So take it away. I'll put 5 minutes on the clock. And if you're checking out now, then and read more light. I'm going to throw beautiful. Throw some more stuff in the comments. I did neglect to promote. We've got Writer's Studio coming up again tomorrow. It's the 1st and 3rd every month from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Time. And that's we could talk about the trials and triumphs of our writing over the last couple of weeks. It is really beautiful, and to get that Zoom code, just join the event. Like I said, I probably would. I'm talking about what writing I think should be in the world. It's journaling, but I find that that's very helpful for me in free writing. Gets the speak. The juices are leaking and would just flip it all on its head. If you were wondering what the buzzing is over here, a phone call from an unknown number. When the alarm goes off, it'll be in 2 minutes. One minute left. No pressure. Totally, of course, always feel free to keep writing after this. Um, I know I think that it's probably really boring to have a silent video. um, but always keep writing afterwards if you've got something going. I promised a terrible sound, didn't I? Thank you so much for being here with me today. I love doing these videos. I love having you with me. As always, I hope that you will let us know what it is that you need for Writing Center. We're here as a community resource. We want to teach. We want to support. The Midwest Writing Center's mission statement is to foster an appreciation and support and educate its creators. While I talk about, well, Ryan and I talk about writing more light into your life, into our community, into this world, we also really want to support our writing community and our literary community. It is really special to be part of something that fosters for the word and the written word. So thank you as always. We are also doing our year-end giving campaign. If you have a few dollars to spare, we have a donor who will match up to $5,000 in donation. So you can think of it as, you know, your donation, no matter what, be dope. Will be doubled, which is really great. You can access that information on our website, which again, mwcqc.org, to donate. Thank you so much for being here today. I will see you next week. We'll talk about, we will talk looking at our old writing with new eyes and how to deal with ourselves, not throw away a whole piece. I'm going to bring out my own terrible adolescent writing, or, just like 2 years ago writing, and we'll examine that so as to learn how to move forward with those works. Happy weekend. Hope I'll see you Saturday at Writer's Studio, and hope you sign up for our open house. I'm really excited. I'm putting together those packages, those care packages soon, and anyway, write more light into your life. Have a great day.